Whether you're a new player looking to dip your toes in a new TCG, or an experienced One Piece player looking to branch out, but you're on a budget, right now is a great time to be playing the One Piece card game. There are so many viable decks in the meta, and so many of these can be built on a relatively low budget. In this video, we'll be going over my picks for the top 10 budget decks that you can build right now in the One Piece card game in 2025, and this is in relation to the current format OP10. So the criteria for the decks in this video, all of them need to be mostly competitively viable. Not going to tell you all of these can win regionals, but some of them absolutely can. All of these lists are going to be not my own, but lists that have topped in a variety of events, whether that's locals, regionals, or anything in between. All of these are topping lists that are guaranteed to be able to make placements in the right hands. All of them need to be able to be built for £50 or $70 maximum, not including shipping. I am going to assume that either you're going to be able to bulk buy a lot of these cards off one seller, or get them off your locals, off friends in your area. So it's unfair to include shipping in these prices, but I've set myself a target of £50 and $70, as that's what I would probably be willing to spend if I was going to try a new TCG. All of these decks need to be beginner friendly. There are one or two that are less beginner friendly, and I will highlight that as we get there. There's good reasons for those. And I've tried to include at least one deck for each colour. Now that's easier said than done for some colours, looking at you, red. But I have got at least one deck for each colour that you could take and reasonably win your locals, or maybe even top a regional event with. So in number 10, I do have Green Uta. Green Uta is a deck that's all around drawing extra cards and spamming the boards with units that cheat out other units. As you can see here, Uta's leader effect, when she attacks, she gets to flip the top card of her deck. If it's film, you add it to your hand. So this essentially draws 2 cards a turn. Really cool leader, very fun, and has access to a few unique tools. In terms of the budget, this is around the top end of our £50 or $70 budget. And on these slides, I've highlighted every card that's going to set you back over £1 or $1 for a copy. If there's only one price, that means that in the other currency, it's lower than £1 or $1. The core strategy of the Uta deck is based around drawing extra cards with your leader effect and using those extra cards to pull off crazy combos. For example, this Luffy that plays a 4 cost, which can play this Brook, and then this Brook plays a 3 cost. If you're a fan of aggressive spam decks that also have a ton of cards in hand, Uta may well be the deck for you. In terms of the value cards, this Nami is definitely somewhat optional. There have been lists in the past that have not played this card. If you didn't want to shell out for this card, you could include extra copies of the Chopper 2K, the Gordon Blocker, or even the 7 cost Luffy. This Shanks, I think, is mandatory. It's really important to help deal with your opponent's top end. This Shanks on play says KO 1 rested character, which is pretty crazy. This Uta blocker, you could swap this if you really don't want to buy these for some of these chump blockers like Gordon, and there's also a film Bluno blocker that you can include. Hody Jones, I think you should be buying a couple copies of at least anyway. This list is a list that went 5-2 in an Eggman Events winner box. That's a reasonably large online tournament. Clearly shows that this deck can perform at a high level. If you're a bit more of an experienced player but looking to branch out into a new deck, then Marshall D. Teach Blackbeard may be the deck for you. This is one of the decks that I would say is not beginner friendly. This deck relies heavily on knowledge of the meta and knowledge of what's in your opponent's decks. But with how powerful this deck is and how budget friendly it is, I couldn't not include this. So this deck uniquely does not get to use on-play effects, but you can also turn off your opponents, and your opponent's deck is going to be based around those, because on-play effects are some of the most impactful in the One Piece card game. The Blackbeard deck is based all around removing your opponent's stuff whilst developing your own, and building up to this massive 10 cost 12k power Blackbeard blocker that denies one of your opponent's characters from attacking, and basically freely blocks one more attack because he is so large. Also shuts off your opponent's leader's effects, which is useful into some annoying decks like Enel. He also has access to this incredible card, Jesus Burgess, who gets larger and larger the more cards are in your trash and cannot be KO'd by effects. The big card that costs money in this is Finger Gun. If you're in Europe, this is a lot more reasonable. But for the Americans, this is $11 a copy. This is basically non-negotiable. I think you really do need this card. If you want to build Blackbeard and you can't play this card, I would include extra copy of Black Hole, an extra copy of Liberation, an extra copy of Lafitte, and an extra copy of Shiryu, this one. All of the rest of the cards in this deck are very, very cheap. Pennies, or a couple bucks for Kuzan, and maybe $1 on Blackbeard. But even he's very, very cheap. This deck is just quite hard to play. You really need to know what your opponent's deck is doing, as well as what your own deck's doing. So I would not recommend this for beginners. But if you're a budget-conscious player who's looking to take the game to the next level, Blackbeard is absolutely a strong deck, and can win regionals. If you're a fan of alternate win cons, then Nami may well be the deck for you. This deck plays like no other in the One Piece card game. This deck is based around using events and characters' effects to mill your deck down to 0. Because once your deck hits 0, as you see with the Nami's leader effect, you win the game. Normally you would lose, but if you're playing Nami, you win. So as you can see, we're playing lots and lots of events, all that either draw cards or mill cards when you resolve them, to counter our opponent's swings and get further down the game and mill and draw more and more cards out of our deck. The only real cards with any value, there's one copy of Gravity Blade Raging Tiger. This is like $2. It's also a tech card, so if you didn't want to buy one of these, you can absolutely swap it out for probably another Snake Dance. Love Love Mellow is non-negotiable. You do need 4 of these. There is no good replacement for this. And this is £4 or $8. But at a low price of £30 or $50 for the whole deck, I think this is very reasonable. This list is one that won a regional. This exact list won a regional over in America just last week. So, very powerful deck if you enjoy its playstyle. This is not a deck I would recommend to brand new players, because you're not really playing One Piece card game. This is a deck for more experienced players who have either fallen out of love with the meta, or just enjoy trying out alternate win cons. Vegapunk is a very fun, aggressive yellow deck that requires a sharp mind, but can be incredibly rewarding. As it says on here, you have 2 life and cannot attack, but for just 1 Don, you can put a 5-cost Egghead card into play, or on the top of your life. So every single turn, for just 1 Don, you can heal. If you're a fan of healing and triggers, this is the leader for you. And as you can expect, this leader is all based around playing out these Egghead cards. We have Nami and Luffy, who are Egghead cards that have some tempo removal effects. We have Shaka and Pythagoras that can block or have on-KO effects to keep up the board tempo. We've got annoying events like Please Save Me, which lets you summon any of your Eggheads back from the trash on trigger. And we've got lots of draw and search with this Searcher event, Derashi, and Lilith to get you further down the deck and increase your consistency. The Vegapunk deck is based all around flooding the board very, very quickly with lots of 5-cost units, which are relatively hard to interact with for your opponents, especially if they're playing removal decks, and can aggro your opponents down very, very quickly. Cards like Atlas that cannot be KO'd, and Pythagoras that summon another guy from the trash on KO, help you keep up board tempo, and Nami and Luffy can be used to move your opponent's plays whilst developing your own. In terms of the cost of the deck, this is around £50 or $65, and there are only a few cards with any value. You do need 4 of this Nami. This is probably the best Egghead overall, this or the blocker Shaka. So unfortunately, whilst this does cost £4 or $5 a copy, you will need 4 of these. Kid and Ace, you only need 2 copies of each of these. I would recommend getting the Aces. If you don't want to play the Kids, you could run 2 more copies of this card here, York. And the Egghead Luffys are cheap enough now that you should have no problem really getting these. All of the rest of the cards in this deck cost absolute pennies. Lots of people at your locals will have the majority of this in their bulk. So if this is a deck you're interested in playing, definitely ask your friends or people at your local game store. This deck definitely requires a little bit more skill than other decks. but can be incredibly rewarding. This is a list that actually won an online 20 or so man locals, but make no mistake, that online event had a ton of really good players, including some regional winners. So just goes to show, Vegapunk can hang with the best. My pick for the number 6 spot and the best and only red deck on this list is Bello Betty. So if you're a fan of red decks, this is the one you're going to want to check out. Bello Betty is a deck that's all around getting triggers, spamming board, and smacking your opponent as hard as you possibly can. This deck just smacks face for ridiculously large numbers because of Bello Betty's leader effect. Discarding one card to give 3 characters 3000 power is insane value. One card for 9k power. Utterly ridiculous. This deck is great for quick games and it's really good for new players. So if we take a look at the list, you can see this deck is all based around playing other characters. You've got this Ivankov that plays more characters. You've got this Ivankov that plays more characters. And lots of your characters have triggers that say, play this card. The only card in this deck with any value at all is this dragon. This dragon is around £5 or $9. It is really nice at 2, but if you don't have the money for a couple of these, you could swap these out for an extra copy of the Koala and an extra copy of this 5-cost Ivankov, and then that will take your deck down to, like, next to nothing. Very, very cheap indeed. Whilst every deck in the One Piece card game does, of course, have some nuance, this is one of the simplest decks in the game. You play guys, you buff them up, and you smack. It gets no simpler than that, and Bello Betty is a pretty fun deck with a fairly unique playstyle as well. There's nothing else that hits quite this hard. So if you're a fan of maximum aggression in card games, definitely check out Bello Betty, and you can pick her up for so cheap, it's crazy. This is not a list that's topped in this format, but this list is one that got a top at a regional in the previous format, OP10. We're relatively new into the OP10 format, and Bello Betty, whilst a lot of people do respect it as sort of a tier 2 deck, it hasn't topped any regionals yet, so I don't have a current list for you, but this one, I don't imagine this will change very much. Now, Calgara is by far the cheapest deck on this list. This deck, you're going to be surprised by just how little this costs. So Calgara's effect, as you can see, is based all around taking your own life to accelerate your board state by playing out powerful characters for free. We have characters like the 6-cost 8k vanilla Calgara and the Wiper that can help you with a bit of a deck search that you can play out for free with your leader's effect, alongside more board spam, for example, like Ohm, who can play out Holy, and Dartsu for a little bit of removal to keep up your board tempo and go super aggressive at your opponent's life. And in that mid to later game, we have cards like Mont Blanc Noland that can give you a heal here and there, and we've got lots and lots of defensive counter events like the Earth Won't Lose and L4, keep you alive and keep your board swinging at your opponent. There are no cards in this deck that cost more than $1, and I'd be surprised if any of these cards cost more than 50 cents. This is the cheapest deck in the game by far. If you are really brand new and really don't want to spend any money, go down to your local game store, ask if they've got any of these cards in their bulk. They likely will, and we'll be happy to just give you them for free. There is nothing in here that's particularly rare or valuable, so Calgara is a great pick if you like aggressive decks and are super budget conscious. This list is one that got second place in an online locals, losing to the Vegapunk list that we talked about earlier. So pretty cool to see that Calgara can hang with the best decks out there. Now, if you're a fan of tempo removal type decks, Usopp may well be the deck for you. The blue-black combination in the One Piece card game has been historically incredibly strong, and Usopp is no different. Usopp's effect gives your characters a higher cost, which makes it harder to interact with them for your opponent's removal pieces. And then when they do remove your characters, well, he lets you draw a card. This deck is really good at punishing opposing removal decks for playing their strategy, and has some really powerful cards and has an incredibly important stadium, which is the Corridor Coliseum. The Corridor Coliseum warps the rules of the game. It lets your Dressrosa type characters attack opposing characters on the turn that you play them, giving everything pseudo rush. Usopp is fundamentally a combo tempo removal deck. You have combos like your Rebecca playing out Kairos plus a 4 cost to remove a bunch of cards, and we have the King Kong gun, which can give you extra pressure to just close out the game at the end. This list costs just as little as £30 or $40, and this is a list that made the top 32 at the London Regionals. The only cards with any value in here are your Kairos, who is not negotiable. You do need 4 of these. This Luffy, if you can't afford 2, you can sub him out. You could sub him out, for example, for a 4th copy of the Roronoa Zoro and a 4th copy of the Rebecca Searcher. However, I do think this card is very valuable at 2, so if you can justify spending $10 on a couple of these, I absolutely would. Usopp is probably one of the top 5 or 6 decks in the game. Very powerful in the right hands. Not the easiest to play, but not terribly complicated either. It's very easy to get a lot of value with Usopp, with the Corridor Coliseum giving you extra pressure on your opponent's board, and your removal pieces like Kiros and Zoro, removing it when battle just can't. As we enter the top 3, my number 3 pick is Vinsmoke Reiju. Vinsmoke Reiju is a blue-purple aggressive combo deck that's all around drawing extra cards and cheating out really big characters for very little cost. So the fundamental combos in this Reiju deck rely on these little baby Vinsmokes. So for example, this Vinsmoke Ichiji, you play him on the board, you can activate main, do Don -1, put him in the trash, and then bring back a 7 cost Vinsmoke Ichiji from your hand or your trash. So for 4 Don, you can play a 7 cost, and that 7 cost is a 7/7 with Rush that gives minus 2000 power to one of your opponent's units. Really, really powerful. If you're someone who enjoys putting together combos and aggressing your opponent out of the game, I would absolutely recommend this Vinsmoke Reiju deck. This deck makes great use of its stage, the Kingdom of Germa, to let you trash those large Vinsmoke family characters and then resummon them with the low cost ones. We also have a little bit of a Foxy Pirates engine. You have this Porsche that can do a top 5 search for any Foxy Pirates type character. For example, the Foxy 2K and the Chopper Blocker. And then this can cheat out a character with 4000 power or less, which handily is the power of your Vinsmoke Ichiji. In this way, for just 3 Don, you can play 3/5 and a 7/7, which is utterly ridiculous value. And remember, this draws you a card because of your leader's effect. We also have the 4-cost Vinsmoke Reiju, which can be summoned by the 2-cost Vinsmoke Reiju to refill our hand, drawing 3 cards with this effect in combination with your leader's effect. You've also now got a new Searcher in the Vinsmoke Sanji, straight out of OP10, to increase our consistency. This is a deck that really goes fast, but unlike some of the red decks, does not run out of steam in the late game because of how many cards you're drawing with your Reiju effect and your leader's effect. If you're a fan of aggressive decks that just don't die, this is the one for you. Lim as a deck is somewhat hard to define. Somewhat aggressive, somewhat controlling, and with inbuilt ramp on your leader, this deck is no joke. This deck has a weird downside in that your characters enter play as rested, but lots of these Odyssey type characters have conditions to which at the end of your turn, you can stand them back out. Not only does this negate your leader's downside, but it also lets you attack with your characters and then restand them so that your opponent cannot attack back into them, letting you build your board and use your life as a buffer to protect your characters. Now, this list is the list that won the London Regionals. There was one card in here with an Adio 2K counter that is around $20 a copy, but if you just swap it out for this Portgasti Ace 2K counter, and it's really not that big a downside, this deck is suddenly less than $50. Crazy, crazy cheap, and almost all of that cost comes from this card, Usahachi. This is a 2K, and if you really didn't want to spend this $36 on Usahachi, you could absolutely just pick up another green or purple 2K, but this is pretty good. This guy lets you rest a 5 cost at the end of the game, helping you go for game a little bit easier. This limb deck is based all around using your effects like the 3-cost limbs effect, the 1-cost limbs effect, and the 5-cost Doflamingos effect to restand your characters so that your opponent cannot interact with them, and using your leader's effect to cheat out big characters whilst ramping you towards that late game faster than your opponent. You also have some pretty decent removal cards in the Edward Newgate and the Sakazuki, whilst the Mihawk gives you a little bit of extra aggression, and the Enel and the 3-cost Limb and the 5-cost Sabo all give you extra draws. Limb is an aggressive deck that gives you a lot of different actions that you can do, gives you a fair amount of agency, all whilst not being too difficult to play. This is absolutely a deck that I would recommend to beginners, and looks to be one of the strongest in the OP10 format. And my pick for number 1 is Blue Doflamingo. This deck does it all. You can be aggressive, you can be controlling, you can draw cards, you can cheat out characters, and this deck looks to be going nowhere. Looking at Japanese results from the next set, EBO2, Doflamingo looks to be one of the top decks, if not the top dog anymore, certainly top 5. And this deck has also just been hit with a ban, so incredibly unlikely that we'll see any more bans or nerfs affecting this guy. What his leader effect lets you do is you can put 2 Don on him and tap 1 when you attack. You flip the top card of your deck. If it's a 4-cost Warlord of the Sea, you can play it for no cost. This lets you spam your board with powerful characters that get extra value out of their on plays, like Falgalore, who can bounce a 4, Weevil, who draws a card, and Boa, who stacks your deck, gives you Arrested Don, and is a blocker. Incredible stuff. This list is one that got top 32 at a regional just last weekend, and you could get this for even a little bit cheaper. If you can find the Don Quixote Doflamingo starter deck, that's ST17, in a store near you, you can get this even cheaper. That's mostly just going to be the official Bandai stores at this point if you're looking to get it for RRP, but you never know. That deck will include 2 copies of Buggy, 2 copies of Law, and 2 copies of Hancock. That's $18 worth of value for just 12, and if you buy 2 of those, you're going to have all your Buggies, all your Laws, and all your Hancocks for just 24 bucks. And then, as you can see, the rest of this deck is very, very cheap. This Perona is non-negotiable. You do need 3 of these, and most lists are playing 4 of this, so I would consider getting 4. And this Weevil is absolutely a must at 4. You cannot cut this card. But even with those cards that have a little bit of value, Doflamingo is still an incredibly cheap deck, incredibly powerful, and looks to be still good next set as well, which is really important if you're budget conscious. In terms of how beginner friendly this deck is, it's very easy to get a lot of value with Doflamingo at a very low skill level. However, this is arguably one of the deepest decks in the game. The best players will absolutely wipe you with Doflamingo whilst you're having a good time against average Doflamingo players. So it's a really good one if you just want to stick to one deck. Really easy to pick up and start winning games, but offers a lot of opportunity for progression as a player. So that was my picks for the top 10 budget decks in the One Piece card game in Big 2025. This is only in reference to the OP10 format. EBO2 is not out yet, and when it does, we don't know what the price of those cards are going to be, and we don't really know how that meta is going to develop, because we've had a wave of bans, whereas Japan didn't. So whilst we can theorize, we can't say for sure how that meta is going to turn out until it does. If this is a video you've enjoyed, do consider leaving a like and a subscribe to the channel. And let me know in the comments if you'd like to see me do another one of these in EBO2 and OP11. Let me know which deck you're going to be picking up if you're a new player, or if you're an existing player looking to expand their volume of decks. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.